Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I remember reading somewhere that the rate that herd animals are killed by predators in Africa is the same rate as the number of people who just completely disappear. Some of these are fodder for the dark web and the like. But what about the people who don't just disappear, but are known to die through tragic happenstance? Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and other similar events. The Titanic is another one, and the dreaded Bermuda Triangle. As implied, I did spot some of the missing in the dark web. But what happened to the larger groups of people who die, but their bodies are almost unrecoverable? There is a bit more to their deaths, judging by the records that I have seen. Dragons are real, but since they cannot be controlled or weaponized by conventional means, placation seems to the on-hand tactic for dealing with them. And while there are not many in the world, as those details have been scrubbed from any specific mention, and given the complete radio silence from Russia and China, we would be unable to provide an exact number anyway. Every so often, a large group of people who vanish tragically. Flight 370 is a fairly public and recent event similar to what is described. 239 people, or as they have become viewed as portions of a meal. Every so often, a group of over 150 people would disappear, presumed to be dead. They are divvied up and prepared per the dragon's requirements. If the cooks are able to preserve some part of the body, it will be the only piece found for closure of the bereaved families. This has been going on for a while, decades at least, and as time goes on, the number of people that need to disappear increases, or the frequency in which groups vanishes. I am well aware of how this sounds. Then, I thought about it, especially for modern times, specifically mobile phones. Ever wonder why you're asked to turn them off when you're onto flights? They say it is so it doesn't mess up with the instruments. But if I was going to design an interconnected system to stay in control of an airborne vehicle that can be measured in the number of elephants, I would make sure that there is no way that the mobile home network in absolutely no way interferes with my systems. We have all seen the signal strength indicators in those devices. Why can't we just actively track mobile phones by signal strength? It obviously makes a connection with a tower or network, so it is plausible. All they would need in theory is to search for those missing phones along the network and use that to triangulate the location of the majority of them. Sure, water damage could affect, but they still had a connection before the damage. All it would take is the records of these events to narrow it down. Anyway, I know you're here for more than my observations. There is a journal of a dragon discoverer, and the autopsy of the said discoverer as well. Case file, Dragon, number 013. I've been traveling through the jungle for weeks now. I am reasonably certain that I am lost. However, I am not new to these expeditions, and I pay attention to the surroundings. I've also been here before, so I have that as an advantage. I heard a noise last night. Something is stalking me through this jungle, and I am going to set up my tent and write some more once I have a clue what's going on. Several days have passed, with a rough distance traveled in the direction. I have never experienced silence like this. The only sound I can hear is the scratching of pen on paper. I can barely hear myself breathe. When writers describe a sense of dread blanketing the area being described, I now fully appreciate, and I hate it. I can't focus. I should be 2 days away from the cave system that I am looking for. Though, when I think about it, I really don't want to go. 2 more days with notes pass. It hasn't killed me, but I don't know how much longer I can keep it entertained. I know the source of dread now, and seeing it, I almost wish the soul-crushing emotion. Dragons are real. I am staring at one right now. Dark scales cover this glamorous monster, at least 40 feet long, and it just lies there, bones all around it. When I enter the cave, I didn't even see it until it blocked the passage when I went to leave. When it speaks to me, it is excruciating, not in volume, just the raw power of its voice. He says that I am the first visitor in a long while. It spoke at me for hours? I'm not sure. My bones are still aching, and for all I know, it could be just minutes. But the pain is excruciating, and I have been bitten by a bullet ant before. Several sketches of the dragon are seen in the journal. I hear movement from the cave mouth. The dragon is awake and smiling. It is the most horrifying smile that I have seen. A large metal cage filled with corpses get pushed in. The journal ends here, and apparently, the morticians are part of a larger shadow community. It is through another aspect of the community that the journal was passed on. Curiously, it was not been destroyed. And when I asked the morticians why it wasn't destroyed, they reminded me that it is possible to follow the man's path. And there is an autopsy file of the explorer. Autopsy. Male, late 30s. Bone structure is riddled with microfractures. Skeletal structure was compromised, and the cause of death was a morphine overdose administered while the explorer was asleep. Apparently, dragons can cause microfractures to normal humans due to the intensity of their power, but the human with the LRP5 mutation with gain of function are able to resist the damage. However, since the known LRP5 mutations are of interest to the scientific community, the LRP5 ones who are not tracked are encouraged to assist the shadow community. And as a side note, an agent who wishes to speak with me has been knocking on my door for the past hour. I will speak with her momentarily, and I will update you depending on how the conversation progresses. I apologize for the delayed update, but the conversation with the agent that I previously mentioned had consequences that demanded an immediate response. While a certain government has been keeping abreast of my updates, they approached me solely due to my history, specifically Case 1. The base where I was last deployed to had been operating smoothly. Too smoothly for anything having to deal with a government or military bureaucracy. They ask, as gently as any secretive government agency concerned about the integrity of a military base on US soil, for me to accompany them on a base visit. We left immediately. The ride to the base was tense, judging by the very slight shifting of the 3 agents that I was accompanying. We got to a cheap motel an hour's drive from the base and booked in for the night. And while I was handed a uniform to change into, I pondered over some of the cases that I had read and not archived yet, when an epiphany occurred. What if the morticians and whoever else pondered about the cryptids were wrong about the relationship between the rake, the fleshgate, and the crawler? What if they weren't offshoots, but aggressive scouts? I am unsure for whom they are scouting, but this is just an alternate perspective based on facts. The rake and the flesh gate are reported to have some influence over the human mind. The rake is more psyops, and the flesh gate is more focused on infiltration tactics. The crawler would be a shock troop, focusing on the aspect of fear when people notice the truly inhuman speeds that they can actually exhibit. Taking this perspective into a real-world situation, the best way to know how to use your scouts effectively is to test them against people who are less observant to see who the scout and their targets will react. Remember, we are not dealing with humans spying on humans, but monsters spying on humans. Who would believe you if you say that you saw a monster watching you? You would be teased or ignored. Only the people who have also witnessed these monsters would believe you. And as a group, you would be disregarded or mocked. So, looking at the premise of this being regarded as a joke, let's push forward and go for execution. How would these invaders do just that? They could go for a small civilian population with the inherent capabilities they possess. They could, if they were methodical, take over very swiftly and easily. But all it would tell them is what they would already know. They can cause fear, paranoia, or despondency. But what about military personnel? Not the elite special forces, but the bread and butter of the armed forces. A small base of little consequence in the grand scheme of situations, a good testing ground, a petri dish of some sorts, like the base that I was deployed to for my promotion examinations. If this agency just wanted to grab me, I doubt I could stop them if they rushed me. Them wanting a dialogue that then progressed to our current situation could indicate that this totally insane theory had some basis. Looking over the uniform, I remember that event and the decisions I made, and something struck me as unusual. There isn't supposed to be a Wendigo that close to that base. It ranged almost 80 miles further away. Something is up, and I think the situation almost certainly ties in. An hour after I settled down into my room, the primary agent entered my room. The look on her face was an expression of concern. When I pressed for details, she mentioned that her team was acting strangely, like they were waiting for prompts in conversation. She asked to stay in the same room as she didn't trust the 3 agents in the other room. With my knowledge of the unit that I was traveling with, I agreed, and I volunteered to sleep on the couch. Naturally, I wasn't stupid to actually fall asleep. I came up with the 3 agents, the one in charge, and her 2 subordinates. We never met any additional staff. I had a plan, and I needed to work carefully. Since I was suspecting a mass infiltration of Fleshgate, I focused on the thoughts of returning to the base, and only on those thoughts. The night was long, and all 5 of us packed into the SUV and drove the rest of the way to the base. And as we were let in, I noticed the guard watch me intensely. Stepping out of the vehicle and walking around, we noticed that all of them were staring at me, until it was noticed by us. The layout hadn't changed, and I was asked how I wished to proceed. The agent in charge decided to speak with the base commander, and I sat in on the meeting. The base commander seemed to be in control, but there were small details that I keep noticing. Odd twitches, overlong glances, shifting uncomfortably. They were small, but I could see them. They offered a tour of the grounds, which was accepted by the agents, but I declined. When asked, I reminded them that I had already attended this base in the past, but would like to visit the spot of my old shame. An escort was offered, and I took the opportunity. During my time at the base, I had paid attention to the natural caves or overhangs in the area. Should I somehow not make it back in time during an overlong excursion, well, I am not sure how Wendigo and Fleshgates would interact. I had a flash of inspiration. My escort was a 4-man squad who were behaving well, except for the sidelong glances that I would catch. As we got closer to the site of the incident, their pacing shifted slightly. They were getting ready to jump me. I tackled the soldier to the side, grabbing his combat knife while we ran. The other 3 opened fire, and fortunately, by the time they had started firing and the time I tackled their 4th, it was enough for me to get behind a tree. The knife went into the throat of the Fleshgate, stripping his weapons off of his body. I counterattacked and was able to eliminate the remaining 3 Fleshgates. Fleshgates bleed an off-pink color, and the consistency is thicker than blood. I removed from them their weaponry, and some MREs just in case. And I looked around, trying to get my bearings, and I headed away from the base. It took me half an hour to find what I suspected. A dead Wendigo. I grabbed some poisonous mushrooms, and I took them closer to base. I couldn't fight everyone there with standard weapons. They could scatter too easily. But we all need to eat, and hopefully they are susceptible to poison. As you can likely ascertain, they were. I will write up the details of the rest of the encounter and how the truth was kept hidden from the government, plus the various autopsies that would be conducted. And I also met a retired mortician. Sorry for the delay. This has been a difficult case file to finish writing up, mainly due to the repercussions of my actions. Like I previously mentioned, I was suspicious regarding the personnel on the base, and given what I found in the forest, I took precautions. Knowing the poisonous herbs and mushrooms in the area, I took a significant amount. The base personnel amount is wrong. There are likely to be more discrepancies, and I know that one of those agents is likely to be another Fleshgate. I have the tools to do what is required, but deployment will be difficult. I needed to affect as many people as I can, including the agents. I am the only person I know is not affected. I got little sleep, not that any reasonable individual would in this situation. Knowing some protocols, I was able to use the natural poisonous substances to infect the food and cooking utensils. And hours later, the infiltrators started to succumb to the poison. I figured it would be likely that I would be identified as the culprit. Fortunately, when I was based here, I would plot how I would assault in this base. Positions to use for checkpoints, places to hide myself or supplies. And while the army personnel do not carry normally, the agents would be required to arm myself. The agent who brought me here figured me out. I acted, slamming her against the wall and my hand over her mouth, and fought her for her weapon. 2 discharges went wild during the struggle, and I was able to wrest control. 1 to the guy, and 1 to the head. Blood poured from the wounds, and I grabbed her spare clip and her cell phone, tossing the cell phone to the side once I left the building, and I went on the assault. It took me 2 hours to kill everyone, and I received a total of 5 gunshots. Ignoring the pain, I noticed that not all bodies bled red. About 65% of the bodies seemed to slightly deflate upon death, and the liquid they leaked was not red, but a light pink color. It also didn't look like blood. The consistency was slightly thicker, like the mustard. When I was searching the commander's office, who was a Fleshgate, I created a throwaway email account and emailed the mortician contact. I sent them the direct dial number for the office only. And 8 seconds later, the phone rang. I told them about the fleshgate infiltration into this space. I explained my actions to them, and they advised that they would send a retired mortician to attend the site. And while they never dealt with autopsies anymore, they stayed within the organization. So I waited. Part of me wanted to move the bodies to make corpse retrieval easier, but the practical side of me said that they would likely be upset with me disturbing the evidence. Sitting in the commander's office, the wait was long. I wanted to focus on how to identify fleshgates, but it would require resources that I don't have access to. And I also had no major inclination to look too deeply into it. I appreciated my archivist duties. While being active would be appreciated, I would rather just archive. The retired mortician arrived in a large truck. 3 people piled out of the back, and I met them at the gate. As they approached on foot, I pulled out a knife, and I explained that some of the corpses were fleshgates and bled a different color. I cut myself slightly and bled. The others complied with the request and showed the same color. I was mentally projecting an off-green color, but it seems these were humans. I walked the mortician through the assault on the base, and I explained about the cryptid corpse in the woods. The retired mortician thanked me for the details when I spotted his name tag. I confirmed that this was the mortician that retired after a mush corpse. His face paled significantly at the mere mention of that incident, and he politely advised that I do not mention that event again. Pointedly would be a more apt way to describe it. The bodies were placed into the truck and we all piled in. The ride back was quiet. The one thing I did not was the haunted look that Will shared. Everyone here had a personal encounter with a cryptid. It took me a while to recover sufficiently from my injuries, and while that transpired, the autopsies were conducted. Instead of doing a breakdown of each individual one, I will convey the pertinent details. Autopsy. Humans. Poison from the death cap mushroom ingested, likely cause of death. The ones who survived the initial poison were shot multiple times with a bullet to the head post-mortem. This actually caused some trouble for the attending morticians, as there seemed to be discrepancies in the parts of the brain governing memory and perception. The damage makes it hard to verify if all suffered the same level of inflammation, triggering what could be attributed to the false memories. Fleshgates. Humanoid with a similar skeletal structure made of hardened cartilage in an approximate facsimile of the human skeleton. Upon death, the cartilage softens, given the slightly deflated appearances as noted by the acid who eliminated the nest of the infiltrators. The musculature also seems to have a more fluid quality, allowing the fleshgates to alter their forms to better reflect upon the false memories they impart. The brain has extra sections, which are theorized to affect others, allowing false memories to allow for easier infiltration. Extra glands are filled with a pheromone, which allow for weakening of the immune system, allowing the telepathic manipulations to occur more easily within the victims. Wendigo. Cryptid. Elongated humanoid. Deterioration of the vocal cords and the speech part of the brain indicates that the natural vocabulary is greatly diminished. The state of this part of the brain is equivalent to that of a baby learning to speak, copying sounds here with no understanding of context. The skin was thickened to deal with the lower temperatures that they are readily exposed, which also helps act as a natural form of body armor. The musculature is approximately 8 times greater than a human's, which also helps with body toughness. Claws are hardened nails to levels thought impossible. The Wendigo was beaten to death, which, given the resilience this particular specimen demonstrated, speaks greatly of the effectiveness of flesh gates. This is the third infiltration attempt in the past 60 years. There were 4 experiments regarding the Ouija board from what I have seen. 3 of these cases showed no significant supernatural events other than flickering of an entity. The 4th and final one demanded the cessation of these trials once they recovered all the parts that they could find. Experiment Ouija number 04 Final. 3 couples had been manipulated into performing on an Ouija board inside an abandoned home that had been fitted with surveillance cameras and microphones. 2 of these couples were not strong believers in the supernatural, not completely closed-minded, however. The primary couple were religious, but not aggressively so. They brought an Ouija board from their home and chatted casually while setting up the board in planchette. The second and tertiary couples were not thrilled when they saw the board itself, but complied with the urging to partake. Customary opening rituals were performed with what is believed to be a prayer. The audio did not reflect this. All that could be heard was screaming and begging for mercy for several minutes while the 3 couples just sat there praying. As they finished, the screaming stopped, and they asked the opening question. The only camera that didn't immediately turn to static was the one in the living room, where the Ouija board was set up. When I reviewed the tapes for archiving, I determined it to be smoke, not static, and not sure how we got different observations regarding this. As the question started properly, there would be movement in the static or smoke, humanoid at times and not at other times. The noises made from those locations resembled growling, not bestial, more primal. The only properly functioning camera revealed a 7th entity within that room. A tall humanoid with black skin and warped legs. It wasn't looking at the couples, but directly into the camera. The primary couple were a bit more energetic than the other 2 couples for undiscernible reasons. The microphone in that area wasn't transmitting the conversation, even though it was working up until the completion of the opening question. The notes from the researcher spearheading this indicated that he could hear the couples talking just fine. They were trying to contact the spirit of a deceased grandmother of the male of the tertiary couple. Names would be given, but the remains were not identified, just matched to what was left. 3 minutes of questions later, the primary male glanced at a mirror and noticed the humanoid staring at them via the reflection. He went to yell, but wasn't able to make sound. The others glanced at him oddly. Then a voice came from the primary male, impossibly deep, and the voice demanded they resume the experiment. This was underlined in the notes as well. When someone would attempt to question, the humanoid would raise a hand and scratch the air, but wounds would appear on the interjector. The voice would demand they resume. The face of the entity would flinch, like something not used to a facial structure would try to emulate a smile they saw someone else do from a great distance. The question became intensely personal, and going by the investigation conducted by the organization, the answers given were false. The questions were for those of a perverted sense of morality. The answers would be dragged out by the planchette, and while the other 5 would vainly attempt to remove themselves. The entity's body started to flinch in what would be approximated as laughter. The notes for the experiment stopped abruptly during an observation that some aberration was making their way down the hall. It is here. And it is happy at me. And those are the last lines from the case file. The footage goes black. There would be a 2-day pause. Then the head researcher who was personally overseeing the experiment would be located in a remote Danish bed and breakfast, and parts of the 6 volunteers would be discovered in the bed. When the matter was brought to the attention of the local police, the organization were able to take control over the case and subsequent investigations. The room was covered in uncoagulated blood and fecal matter. Phrases in a language thought to be Latin were seen, but the translator team were unable to translate. They tried the rest of the global human lexicon with no success, and the translation team would complain of seeing a writhing humanoid form haunting them 3 days before they commit impossible suicides. One was found hanging by a spider web. One had shot themselves in the head with no gun. Residue or casing, just a hole that matched a .38 caliber bullet with no indication of significant velocity, just trace amounts of unignited gunpowder. The other swallowed medicinal pills, not even available for commercial release for another 3 years, as the chemical formula was still being worked on. 3 left feet, 5 right feet, 2 right hands, 4 left hands, all missing fingers, 4 1/3 of a torso, 3.5 pairs of legs, 6 sets of teeth, 4 skulls, all disembodied pre-mortem. The aforementioned body parts were found in the same bed as the head researcher who woke up to the sight and screamed. The DNA were able to match up what was found to the missing couples, and semen was found on various pieces that matched the head researcher. The head researcher states that after everything went black on the screens, the entity abducted him and forced him to endure torture for a period of time that he has no words to describe other than hellish. He stated he could see the couples were suffering lesser forms of torture, but the entities inflicting the pain and agony highlighted that the head researcher was to blame, as he wanted to see if demons in hell were real. Autopsies of the parts recovered show multiple fractures in the skeletal structure, tearing of muscles. Torsos had the traditional Y cut of an autopsy. However, the scarring indicates that the wounds healed multiple times. The head researcher refuses to fall asleep, saying that he sees them when he closes his eyes. Whether he is referring to the demons or the people whose torture he caused, he will refuse to clarify, and the head researcher also shows the same autopsy scarring. No further research is planned regarding the Ouija board, and I have asked the morticians that if they hear anyone moronic enough to try another experiment, to notify me immediately so I can kill them. I am sorry for the delays in posting this case files, but it turns out, since my efforts regarding the infiltrated military base, I will be doing some fieldwork with a retired mortician. So, we are to head to Scandinavia in the next couple of days. And here are the top comments from my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video. along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.